Harry Cohen's life could be called happy, undoubtedly. Moreover, the man knew that his acquaintances envied him. Some envied him with a smile, while others smiled only at his face, and behind his back they sucked in the details of his personal life, turning everything inside out. Harry bought a new car again. Decent people don't change even their gloves as often as he does his cars. He'd better give the money to orphans, people complained. Have you seen it? Harry gave his wife a trip to Italy for her birthday. Of course they don't need to work so hard, other acquaintance discussed with discontent. Sarah, Harry's wife, had an operation. Did you see how full her lips are? And she has a new nose now. The girls often discussed his beautiful wife. Harry knew about these conversations but treated them with philosophical indifference. Of course, it wasn't always like that. Harry was not born with a golden spoon in his mouth. His mother was an elementary school teacher, and his father was a mechanic. They were practical people, and they couldn't dream. That's why his parents were shocked when their son, a high school student, said, "I want to be a journalist." "Sonny, are you kidding?" Mum shook her head, kneading the dough for the pies. "You're a man. You have to learn real professions, the ones that pay money. To be a construction worker, a doctor, or a lawyer." Harry only laughed, helping his mother to chop cabbage. He didn't take her grumbling seriously. Even if she did not support him, it was only because she was worried that if Harry became a journalist, he would be doomed to poverty. The same fate which she experienced in her youth, she did not want her child to experience. "I'll make a great journalist, Mum. You'll see. Everyone will love me. You'll be proud of your son." The boy, following his dream, passed the necessary exams and got a budget place at the university, majoring in international journalism. Harry studied a lot in order to not only create excellent articles in journalistic style, but also to master foreign languages, to understand the history, culture, politics, and peculiarities of people in other countries. Contrary to the stereotypes his family believed in, Harry was able to become a successful journalist. On the recommendation of his professor, he got a job in a fairly popular monthly magazine. The young journalist's publications became a success and resonated with readers. Many prophesied him the place of editor-in-chief, but Harry did not stop there and once took a risk. During a journalistic event, Harry met Mr. Lewis. The acquaintance was casual. The men got to talking because of an unsuccessful appetizer that was offered to the guests. "Don't take it," Harry heard someone else's voice behind his back. The young man just reached for an appetizing-looking canapé with fish but froze. Turning around, he saw an unfamiliar mature man in a tuxedo with a neat, fashionable beard, which must have been created by a handy barber. "Why?" Harry asked. "The taste is terrible," the bearded stranger complained. "I think the fish was caught many years ago, before it was pinned to the bread with a toothpick." "Well, taste is subjective. What is not to your taste may be good for others," cautiously noted Harry. The man, snorting cheerfully, sipped his drink. "My business is to warn you," he shrugged his shoulders. It would be sad to see a man trying to poison himself and not trying to prevent it. Well, my mission is complete, and now it's up to you whether you want to try it or not. The stranger was peculiar. He remained in place and stared at Harry expectantly. Harry, taking a risk, put the canapé in his mouth. As soon as his taste buds were hit with the flavour, his expression transformed into one of agony. "Oh, you were right," the young man said in a strained voice. "Is it always like this at these kind of events?" He was really disappointed. Harry was so eager to enter the elite crowd of journalists that now his expectations were shattered. The people around him, for the most part, were snobs. The event was dull, and the food was disgusting. "Absolutely every year. I've been coming for 10 years and they haven't learned how to cook," complained the bearded man. "In my youth, when I was still a correspondent, I travelled to islands and lived with tribes. Believe me, they cooked worms better." Harry was intrigued by the story and the identity of the speaker. The man turned out to be the editor-in-chief and founder of a well-known science and travelling magazine. He began his career as an ordinary journalist, but later became a director. The man was very open and talkative. "By the way, we have vacancies for young and ambitious people," Mr. Lewis said enigmatically, seeing the fire in his interlocutor's eyes. When Harry returned to his magazine, he immediately talked to his superiors and colleagues. Although they did not want to lose one of their best workers, they wished him success. As a result, Harry became part of a new team of journalists. From the first day in the editorial office, he knew this was where he belonged. He worked at his computer in the office initially, but one day he went on his first business trip. After that trip, Harry's new life began. As part of his work, Harry began to visit remote corners of the planet, try unusual foods, learn about customs, participate in rituals, and more. He conquered mountain heights and rode big waves, climbed into gorges, and observed volcanoes. The journalist did not try to show people what any tourist could see. Instead, he dug much deeper and went further in his expeditions, showing the world from the inside out. Some criticized him for his extreme approach to gathering materials and lack of self-preservation instinct. Many grimly joked that Harry would never die, but he waved them off, living life to the fullest. The works that came out from under the pen of this travel journalist impressed both readers and colleagues. He even became a nominee and winner of international contests, where his selfless labour was recognised. Harry made and sold photos, wrote unique articles, appeared in radio and TV programmes, and eventually began to earn excellent money. It seemed that nothing would be able to temper his ardour, but then he fell in love. Fortunately, his feelings were reciprocated. Sarah was a young designer. For her creative approach to tasks and responsibility, she was taken on staff at the magazine where Harry worked. When Sarah completed her internship and started her career, Harry was on another trip. Upon his return, tanned, with his hair grown out, and with gifts for his colleagues, he saw a new face. The woman had olive skin, hazel eyes, and full lips curved into a smile, which won him over at first sight. The cute brunette laughed at someone's joke, not noticing the attention of the journalist who had just entered. Harry felt his heart squeeze in his chest with anxious anticipation. The man also gave a new co-worker a gift that day. It's an Indian piece of jewellery called hishai, which means shell necklace. Feeling suddenly embarrassed, the man explained. He felt awkward and even angry with himself. He had spent nights with Indian tribes and swam with sharks, but he couldn't even give her a simple set of beads without blushing like a schoolboy. "Wow!" exclaimed Sarah, admiring the necklace. "So beautiful work. Thank you very much." The necklace was strange, more like a souvenir. However, the next day, Sarah wore it to work. It was no wonder that a month later, Harry and Sarah announced their relationship. They were a beautiful couple who understood each other with half a word and supported each other in everything. Harry valued his chosen one and looked after her with all possible care and tenderness. Sarah accepted her fiancé's thirst for adventure, and although she worried about his absence, she never once spoke against him. However, her friends constantly hinted to Sarah that her boyfriend could cheat on her at any time and that separation could kill any relationship. Sarah simply smiled and shook her head, replying calmly to such attacks. Separation does not kill feelings, but tests them. If the feelings are weak, fake, then of course separation can bring them to nothing. But if they are sincere and strong, it only strengthens and intensifies them. Separation for love is like wind for fire. A small fire is extinguished, but a big one is only blown up. Sarah's girlfriends only rolled their eyes, not believing that her relationship would last long. But to everyone's surprise, 2 years later, Sarah and Harry got married. After 2 more years, they had a daughter, whom they named Amy. The lovely girl looked very similar to her mother, inheriting only her father's piercing blue eyes. The happiness of the spouses knew no bounds. Envious people liked to discuss the family of the successful, famous journalist and his beautiful wife, but Harry and Sarah paid no attention to gossip, enjoying every new day together. In sincere love, they lived another 4 years. But then it turned out that happiness had a price. Fate had decided that Harry had walked along the bright stripes of life for too long. The first blow for him was the death of his parents. Only the support of his wife and the smile of his 4-year-old daughter helped Harry to pull himself together and cope with grief. Later on, Sarah's mother also passed away, and it seemed that nothing could comfort her. But then one day, Sarah threw herself into her husband's arm, hanging on his neck. "We're going to have a baby," she exclaimed, unable to contain her excitement. Sarah had initially planned to share this important news in a more touching way, in a suitable setting. But upon seeing her beloved, she couldn't wait any longer. The man wrapped his pregnant wife in his arms. Their lives were filled with anticipation for the arrival of a new member of their family. Little Amy often followed her mother, asking her questions like, "Will there be a brother or sister?" She pointed to her mother's barely rounded belly. "I don't know yet," the mother said. "It will be a surprise." "Who would you like more?" "A baby brother," the girl said confidently. "I'll play with him." "How will he get out of there? Out of your tummy?" "The doctors will help," evasively answered the mother, under the quiet laughter of her husband. "Will he be petite? Can I put him in a stroller for dolls?" Amy continued to inquire. Meanwhile, Harry carried his wife in his arms, anticipating her wishes. But sometimes his care made Sarah grumble. For example, when he took away her sandwich with sausage or something from fast food. "You're a tyrant," the woman would protest with a smile. "I'll complain about you, anywhere. The doctor said you shouldn't eat that stuff." "A little bit you can, but not all the time, Sarah," Harry threatened with his finger. "Let's cook something tasty and healthy instead." The woman defiantly wrinkled her nose and then hid a smile. She melted from her husband's care. At the same time, they realized their dream. They sold a small 2-room apartment and moved into their house. 2 floors, 4 bedrooms, a spacious kitchen and living room with a fireplace. Sarah was delighted. The pregnant woman already imagined how she would put a Christmas tree in the living room, light the fireplace, and take memorable photos of her family. It seemed like nothing bad could happen. The pregnancy was going well and Sarah felt good. However, in the 7th month, she began to experience severe pains and then started bleeding. The frightened pregnant woman was urgently hospitalized in the operating room for surgical delivery. During the surgery, a baby boy was born, but the surgeons were unable to save the mother. Immediately after the birth of the child, the woman was diagnosed with blood poisoning. Amniotic waters had entered her bloodstream. She fell into a coma and died without regaining consciousness. It was then that Harry first felt the overwhelming sense of helplessness. He realized that no amount of money, wishes, or even prayers could bring back his love, his wife, the mother of his children, and he would have given his life to change places with her, but no one would take him. So Harry Cohen became a widower with 2 children, 6-year-old Amy and a newborn son who didn't even have a name. "You gave a name to my daughter, so I will choose a name for the 2nd child," Sarah had said in the first months of pregnancy. "And when I see his face, then I'll tell you." Now Harry remembered her words with unbearable heart-wrenching pain. She would never see their son or give him a name. No matter how great Harry's grief was, he had no time to suffer. He had to ensure that his children experienced as little pain as possible. Amy was so close to her mother that she could not come to terms with the loss. She cried often, and her father rocked her on his lap, hugging her tightly and letting her tears soak his shirts. He kept telling her that he would be there for her, that he loved her dearly, and that the pain would subside, though he didn't believe it himself. Harry also made changes in his life. He stopped going on business trips because he had many things to take care of, such as his kids' kindergarten, doctor's appointments, and household chores like cooking, cleaning, or braiding Amy's pigtails. And of course, he should care about his newborn baby too. The baby's name was given by Amy. The boy stayed in the hospital for a long time, but when he came home, Amy smiled sincerely for the first time in a while. For Harry, her smile was like a miracle. The girl asked her father if they could call him Kyle, and he agreed. Kyle often cried, did not smile, and it seemed like Kyle did not need anyone. Harry saw his first smile when he was 3 months old and liked a toy. Since then, the child continued to please his relatives with a happy expression on his face, only when he saw something beautiful and bright. Sometimes Harry thought that the child did not love him, so aloof he was. It was difficult for the family to have their first New Year's Eve without Sarah. The holiday seemed like the saddest in the world to Harry. He tried his best, decorated the apartment, and bought many gifts for the children. Unfortunately, the aroma of tangerines and a smart Christmas tree could not dull the pain of their loss. Time passed. The situation became a little stable, but Harry received another piece of bad news. At the age of 2, Kyle was diagnosed with autism. Harry asked the doctor if it was treatable or if there was anything he could do, not understanding the seriousness of the diagnosis. Unfortunately, autism is incurable, the doctor replied. However, you can help your son adapt to society and facilitate communication with other people. If you work with a psychologist, speech therapist, and other specialists, you can correct the disease. Autism is not a sentence, and many outstanding personalities, including actors, doctors, architects, and restaurateurs have it. Even geniuses like Albert Einstein and Mozart are believed to be related to autistic disorders. Your child is special, and it's in your power to support them. Despite the doctor's comforting words, Harry felt fear and pity for his child. The man was confused because he could barely cope with his healthy daughter, let alone his son with autism. However, he hugged Kyle tightly, and in the following years devoted all his spare time to his children. He followed the recommendations of specialists and took special courses, while also not neglecting his daughter. He tried to give his children as much attention as possible. Kyle grew up as an ordinary child, but there were exceptions to the norms accepted in society. For example, the boy did not speak until he was 5 years old, and then quite suddenly began to talk. Sometimes he put words into complicated sentences, which can rarely be heard from the mouth of a kindergartner. Also, Kyle did not like company or playing with other children. He preferred solitude and did not want to socialize with others. Later this became less pronounced, but sometimes excessive socializing or emotions would spill out of the boy. As if his fuses were blown, the child would cry, scream, and beat in hysterics. His older sister gave him all her love, always treated him with understanding and endless patience, and could always find the right words to calm him down. Harry often marvelled at how his daughter managed to do this. Of course, Harry had to put aside his dreams of being a travelling journalist. He began to work from home, and later from the office, where he hired a nanny for the children. During this period, Mr. Lewis, the owner of the magazine, approached him with another interesting proposal. "You, Harry, have completely lost yourself in taking care of the family," the man began abruptly. "I understand the children are small and the boy needs care, but you have become less like yourself. It's time to change that and get a grip." "What are you getting at?" Harry frowned. "I've decided to live for myself, to finally become a pensioner." He grinned into his thick beard. "And I think on whom to leave my business to." He looked meaningfully at Harry, with whom he had become firm friends. "No, I cannot cope. Harry said, shaking his head. Now is not the time to take a high position. I have responsibility for the children, but in my opinion, now is the time, Mr. Lewis said categorically. Make up your mind, Harry. I think you need a shake-up to come to your senses. Consider this your chance. After this conversation, Harry could not sleep a wink. Night after night he looked at the ceiling, weighing the pros and cons. Will he be able to handle it? It seemed to him that if he refused, he would put an end to his career. And then he made up his mind, and he never regretted it. Harry confidently took the reins of the magazine, and later was able to expand its activities. And, to his surprise, he still had enough time for his children. So, Harry and his kids had been living in their close little world for 8 long years. And then Bridget appeared in their lives, and the world was again divided into before and after. "Please, Amy, come to the party tonight," prayed Holly on the other end of the phone line. "Nick's parents are going away for a whole week. Everyone will be there, even Ray. And I'm embarrassed to go alone." Holly had been Amy's best friend since the 4th grade. It was difficult for Amy to refuse her best friend, and she herself really wanted to go and have fun. "I'll try, but I can't promise," said the girl, looking sadly at the desk piled high with books, workbooks and study guides. "You know that I'm prioritizing my studies right now, and I have to pick up my brother from school, and I promised to spend time with him." "You're always with Kyle," noted a classmate. "Take him to the movies, take him home, and then come to me. I'll do your makeup and give you one of my dresses, and then you'll stay at my place tonight." "I'll think about it," Amy answered evasively. Holly was still trying to persuade her friend, but Amy ended the call when she heard the front door slam. "The evil mother has come," whispered the girl into the phone receiver. "I need to go." "Oh," Holly said understandingly. "Good luck." With a doomed sigh, Amy hung up the phone. At that same moment, without knocking, Bridget entered the room. She immediately noticed the smartphone in Amy's hand and the fact that she was lying on her bed. "Why are you hanging on the phone instead of doing work?" the stepmother accused from the doorway. "Your father has spoiled you." Bridget was the same evil stepmother from the well-known fairy tale about Cinderella, except she didn't have 2 mean daughters. Bridget managed to delegate all the housework to Amy, probably afraid of ruining her wildly expensive manicure if she washed the pots. In the end, Amy started washing, ironing, and cooking for herself and Kyle, except for picking up the ash from the electric fireplace. "I've already done everything," replied Amy. "Where's your brother?" "He is on his training course. I'll pick him up now and we'll go to the mall. I want to play arcade games and go to the movies." "Good," said Bridget. "Then I'll pick you up tonight. I'll be around anyway." Amy was surprised, but realised that the stepmother only wanted to create the appearance of spending time with them, maybe even taking a couple of pictures to send Amy's father. "Okay," Amy said, and then she remembered Holly's request. "There's a party at a friend's house tonight. I want to go." "We'll see. I don't want to be alone with that kid. He looks at me like a demon child in a horror movie," the stepmother said, leaving the girl's bedroom. Amy sighed, imagining leaving Kyle alone in the house with their stepmother. Dad had gone on an expedition with his team and had been away for a month. During their last call, he had promised that he would be home in a month, and his voice was happy. Though he had taken on the head post of the magazine, he was genuinely happy to return to full-time work as a travel journalist, exploring the uncharted corners of the planet. He had chosen to travel once a year, but he hoped to share his happiness with his family soon. "When you learn to be a journalist, you and I will travel together, and Kyle will paint pictures." Here he would have enough inspiration and colours for thousands of paintings, the father shared with cheer. Amy was worried and asked, "And if I don't get in?" She was in her final year of high school, and she was worried she wouldn't get into college. "You'll get in, you're just like me," Daddy reassured her. "Tell me, how are things with you? Do you and Bridget get along?" "Yes," the girl answered dryly. However, she couldn't bring herself to answer the question with the bitter truth. Amy simply couldn't ruin his happiness. After all, Bridget was the first woman he had been with since Mum's death. They had met 2 years ago, and a year later she had a ring on her finger. Bridget was a cunning woman who had come from the provinces and put all her energies into wooing Harry, who was still handsome, charming and rich. He owned a magazine as well as a publishing house. With him, the woman behaved docilely, surrounded him with care and love, because she preferred to live in prosperity, although with disgusting offspring. Most of all, she hated Kyle. Bridget was embarrassed to be seen with him in public, even though the boy did not look like a special child at all and was developing normally. Kyle loved to draw and could do it for hours, completely losing himself in his own thoughts and fantasies, which he poured out onto the canvases given to him by his father. Harry encouraged his son's creativity, having noticed that Kyle's mother also loved to draw. However, Kyle was prone to strange states, such as blackouts, during which it was impossible to communicate with him. He seemed to retreat into himself, disconnected from reality. He also experienced breakdowns with real tantrums that were difficult to manage. This is the kind of breakdown that Bridget witnessed on Friday when she arrived to take the kids home after watching a movie at the mall. Kyle fell to the floor yelling and screaming. The boy was thrashing about as if having an epileptic seizure. "Calm him down now," Bridget demanded, looking more at the surroundings than at the child. Amy didn't care about her stepmother's embarrassment. She was trying to help her brother. And the girl handled it well, since it wasn't the first time. "It's a meltdown," the girl explained to her stepmother when they got home. Kyle had sensory overload. He had experienced too many emotions and impressions, and his nervous system couldn't handle it. "What a horror! Someone like him should have been put to sleep when he was a baby," she said dismissively. Amy felt like she'd been splashed with ice water. Rage rose in her throat and blood rushed to her face. "How dare you say that?" The girl was furious. "Why? Disabled people are nothing but trouble, and no good for society," Bridget said. Amy was consumed with resentment and felt the urge to claw the woman's hair for the first time. "I'll tell my father. I'll tell him what you really are," she screamed. "He'll throw you out." "You will?" the woman snorted, looking smug. "And I'll tell him you're lying. I'll tell him you're just upset because I won't let you go to the party. By the way, if you don't stop yelling, you're not going to the party at all." Amy was not concerned about the party at that moment. She felt sorry for her brother. "Dad will believe me over you," Amy persisted. "Well, well, well. Then how do you explain that you're only now opening your ugly mouth? Why didn't you tell him before that I was so bad?" Bridget was right. That night, Amy did not attend the party. Instead, she went to her younger brother's room, climbed onto his narrow bed in the form of a police car, and hugged Kyle tightly. Amy could not sleep a wink. Heavy thoughts tangled in her head, layered one on top of another. She decided that her father's happiness could not be sincere with such a false woman as Bridget. And no matter how much she feared hurting him, she knew she had to tell him the truth after his return. It wasn't until morning, after making such a difficult decision for herself, that Amy was able to forget everything and fall into a short, anxious sleep. A month had passed, and Harry was supposed to return home, but there was no word from him. Amy began to worry seriously, constantly waiting for a phone call, but the phone remained silent. One ordinary morning, Kyle was painting, sitting at his easel, not distracted by the world around him. Amy was sitting in her room and getting prepared for a creative competition at college. The girl was distracted by the doorbell. She put the textbook aside, came down from the second floor and hurried to the front door. She had a glimmer of hope that it was her father and decided not to call and surprise them. The man at the door was not her father, but Amy had seen him a couple of times in the editorial office. It seems that Dad had gone on a trip with him. The man looked at the girl sadly and asked, "Hello, I need to talk. Is your mother home?" he asked. "Stepmother," Amy automatically corrected the guest. "She's gone." The man became even more gloomy. He refused tea and kept hesitating, as if he did not know how to break the news. Then he looked resolutely at the girl and said in a strangled voice, "Amy, your father is dead." "No," the girl answered at once. "He couldn't." "Your father and I were on a catamaran, and the river was too dangerous. The boat got wrecked. We both swam to shore. I swear I saw him in the waves, but the current was too rough. I lost sight of Harry. The catamaran drifted out to sea when the rescuers found it, but there's no trace of your dad. We searched for a long time, almost a month. But he's gone, Amy. I'm sorry." The girl listened to the man as if he were telling a terrible story from someone else's life. She sat on the sofa and straightened her back, staring blankly into the face of the guest. He was explaining something, apologizing for something, saying he could help them. Amy realized that her father was dead a few days later. She desperately called his phone. She prayed to God, promising him something unthinkable and probably foolish in return. She was looking at Kyle, unsure of how to break the news to him. The girl was already replacing his mother. How could she replace his father? The only one who was happy was Bridget. She took out all her black dresses and even bought a mourning cap with a veil, like actresses wore in movies during funerals. She carefully played the role of a grieving widow, but secretly engaged in the distribution of accounts and property. Amy did not know, but Bridget immediately hired clever lawyers to leave the right of inheritance to herself. Harry, being in the prime of his life, simply did not have time to leave a will. Lawyers quickly proved that the woman, caring for the 2 minor children of her husband, had the right to all his fortune. Amy, on the other hand, could not think about money. She felt so bad that she couldn't even study. She didn't even remember writing a creative essay for college. But she clearly remembered when Kyle came to her and hugged her neck, asking quietly, "Daddy will not come back again?" Amy trembled and asked, "How do you know?" "I heard Bridget talking to someone on the phone," the boy confessed. Amy cried, leaning into her brother's thin shoulder and sobbing bitterly, and he comforted her, although it should have been the other way round. Then Amy realized that they were alone in the world. Another month passed. Amy cooked rice oatmeal with raisins, sat next to her brother and ate breakfast indifferently. Recently, it seemed as if the girl couldn't taste the food. Apathy had settled so firmly in her soul that she could skip meals altogether. Bridget entered the kitchen, as spectacular as ever, in a red dress with freshly dyed blonde hair and a trail of luscious perfume. The woman didn't look like a widow at all. "There's a letter for you," she said, throwing an open envelope on the table. "Sort the mail yourself. I'm not your letter carrier." Amy was surprised that the envelope was already open. "I thought it was a bill until I saw your name inside," said Bridget, putting the cup under the coffee machine. Amy looked at the envelope and felt a thrill of excitement. It had been so long since emotions had crept into her soul that her hands trembled. She took out the letter and read it over and over again. "I didn't get in on the scholarship," Amy said in a grey voice. Her shoulders slumped and her eyes filled with moisture. She had failed her exams, and now that hope had melted away. It seemed to the girl that she had disappointed her father even more. "Well, it's no great loss. You can try to get in next year," offered Bridget indifferently, "unless you change your mind or find a rich man to provide for you." Amy frowned, glancing at Bridget, who was sipping her freshly brewed coffee. "But I can pay the education fee," the girl said cautiously. "And where will you get the money, I wonder?" snorted Bridget. "Will you break your piggy bank?" Do you know how much higher education costs? Dad said that he has money set aside for my studies, and even for Kyle's studies, Amy objected, clutching the envelope in her hands. Bridget put aside her cup and looked sternly at her stepdaughter. Listen, baby, take off the rose-coloured glasses, okay? You are no longer a princess in the castle. The king died and took all your fortune with him. Yes, Amy, your father didn't leave you a penny. And if you show off, I'll send your brother to an orphanage for psychos like him. That's easy to do. I'm not even his mother. If you don't want to be separated, shut your mouth and live by my rules. Amy was so shocked that she couldn't even reply. She stared in horror at Bridget, whose facial features had sharpened, making her look like a beast. The woman, however, took the cup again, smiling calmly, and said, So, look for a job. Start right now. I hope you don't think I'm going to let you and your brother hang around my neck. With those words, she left the room. From then on, Harry's children began a new life. Amy got a job in a book cafe, where the pay was not much, but it was the only place that would accept a minor. Bridget constantly threatened to send the boy to an orphanage. When Amy wasn't working, she was cleaning the entire house from top to bottom or cooking food. The stepmother would reproach the children even for a piece of bread, constantly saying that they were getting in the way and interfering with her life. She was especially angry when she invited her friends one day. On such evenings, Amy and Kyle were told to sit in their rooms and not show their noses. Watch after your underdeveloped brother, the woman warned, dressing up before the reception. If any of my friends see him, I will not wash away the shame, and you'll both be sorry. But this is our house. Amy couldn't take it anymore. It was yours, Bridget parried. By the way, we don't have the money to pay for your brother's painting courses. All those paints and easels take a lot of money. But painting helps him, the older sister protested, and he has talent. I can barely make ends meet. Bridget resented it. So from next month on, he won't go there. Let him take a piece of paper and draw at home. Of course the woman was lying. She had money, and plenty of it. But she was always playing the victim role. Amy's problems didn't end that night. She had already gone to bed, ignoring the sounds of music in the living room. And so, at midnight, her stepmother burst into her bedroom, breathing alcohol. What happened? The girl jumped up quickly. Something with Kyle? Is he okay? Put something on, the stepmother demanded, and comb your hair. I want to introduce you to my friends. Hurry up, come on. But I don't want to, Amy protested, clinging to the blanket. You asked me to stay away from your guests. If you don't get dressed now, I'll drag you out in your pajamas, Bridget threatened, glaring at her with alcohol-soaked eyes. Or I'll bring your brother. I'll put him on a stool and make him recite a poem. Or maybe I'll let him have a seizure. My friends have never seen such a circus. After these words, Amy put on a robe and went downstairs. There, squinting at the bright lights of the living room, she stood before a crowd of people. They were sitting on the sofa, in armchairs and on high bar stools. There, Bridget introduced Amy, leading her to the centre of the room. My Amy, a sort of maid. She is so beautiful to be a maid, the blonde man approved, giving her a lustful look. But she's wearing the wrong thing. It would be more interesting to see her without that ugly wrapping. People laughed and Amy shivered from fright, tightening the terry robe on her chest. I promised the guests you would dance, Bridget suddenly said, pushing the girl in the back. Come on. What? Amy's eyes opened wide and she turned to her stepmother in shock. I don't know how. Don't worry. We're an appreciative audience, one of the drunk guests said. We'll applaud, and maybe we'll pay. Music started to play. People began to cheer the girl with shouts and occasional claps, and someone threw some bills at her feet. The girl, feeling disgraced, rushed away. She rushed up the stairs and the sound of other people's laughter like bullets pounding in her back. Running into her brother's nursery, she locked the door from the inside with trembling hands. Crawling under a warm blanket, the girl tried to hold back her tears. Kyle woke up and tried to talk to his sister, but she withdrew into herself. He turned on the nightlight and sat down at the canvas. As the first rays of light entered the room, he showed his sister the painting he had created. Beautiful lilies in an incredible blue hue, the same as Amy and their father's eyes. "A gift for you," the child explained. "Don't be sad." "Thank you, my dear." Amy hugged her brother tightly. She realized then that she would not obey her stepmother and take her brother out of art classes. She did not want to deprive her brother of an outlet and decided to pay for the course herself, using all the money she earned. During the same period, Amy, ashamed of herself, began to steal. Not from someone on the street, but from Bridget. It all started with an accidental theft. Her stepmother left an open bag and a leather purse in plain sight. Amy, tempted, put her hand into the purse and took some change. In the end, Bridget did not even notice the loss, as she did not count the money. However, that evening, the girl burned with embarrassment and did not understand how she could stoop to such a thing. But when she spent the money on a gift for Kyle and saw his meek smile, she was relieved, especially since she was sure that Bridget was spending their father's money. Her stepmother claimed to be going to work, but that was a lie as well. Since then, Amy had occasionally snatched up a bill and put it away. Her only dream was to save up money and move far away from her stepmother with her brother. However, she could only get custody after she turns 18 and has a steady income. Then she hoped to enroll in college again, succeed like her father once did, and start her own business. Only dreams of the future helped her live. Not even half a year had passed since their father disappeared in rough waters when Bridget decided to improve her personal life. "Children, I have news. I've met a wonderful man," she began one evening when Amy returned from work and helped her brother with his school homework. Kyle, in his manner, ignored his stepmother's words. Amy, however, lifted her head from her brother's notebook, staring glumly at her stepmother because she smelled a catch. Why would Bridget share details of her personal life with them? "Congratulations," the girl said dryly. "Thank you, sweetheart." Bridget smiled falsely, looking at the ends of her long hair and considering whether to renew the colour. "You know, it's a challenge to build a personal life when you have a house full of teenagers or disabled minors. I didn't tell Herman you existed, and I want to keep it that way. Do you want to hide us in the basement, or will you finally move in with your new fiancé and leave us here in our parental house?" Amy suggested irritably. "It's much simpler, dear. I have already agreed with one boarding school for autistic people. I explained that the boy was left without a father and that I could not provide him with care. They're ready to take Kyle in." Amy froze with horror and jumped to her feet, dropping a chair behind her. "No! What are you talking about? He can't go to the orphanage. He has a family." "Well, it's just that the situation has changed." The woman wrinkled her nose, not the least embarrassed by such an attack from her stepdaughter. "Look, it's not your fault, sweetheart. It's just that life isn't fair. Besides, he'll be better off there. Don't be selfish and let your brother go to his own kind of freaks." Amy felt so angry that she almost choked. She didn't recognize herself in the grip of such emotion as she threw herself at her stepmother. Bridget had never seen such fierce resistance from Amy before and screamed in fright. "You're as insane as your brother," she yelled, trying to pull Amy away. "You're crazy, family. I'll get rid of you too, you spoiled fool." The scuffle was interrupted by Amy's brother Kyle, who began to worry. Amy immediately came to her senses and pushed Bridget away. "Let your freak pack his things. He's leaving in a week," the stepmother hissed angrily. "Go to hell," the girl shouted back. Amy didn't wait a week. The next day she took Kyle's documents from his special school, preparing an escape plan. 3 days later, after waiting for Bridget to leave the house, Amy began to pack her things. Taking a backpack and a sports bag each, the girl packed only the essentials. She also took all the money she found in the house, and no longer feeling remorseful, took some of her stepmother's gold bling, hoping to sell it. "Where are we going?" asked Kyle with Buddhist calmness. "To the village. You'll like it there, I promise. Mum's parents have a house there," answered Bridget. "When I was little, I was brought a couple of times for the summer, when Grandma was alive. You didn't know her, but she was kind. Don't worry, that's not far from here. But we'll have to take the bus and the train to get to the region. We'll have a real adventure. Can you imagine? Just you and me." Amy did not tell her brother that she did not know what condition the house was in. But she had the address and the belief that anywhere would be better than their current home. After all, she couldn't sleep well under that roof, worrying about herself and her brother. After a night of being paraded in front of her stepmother's guests like a circus monkey, Amy constantly jumped up and down, listening to the sounds of the house. Sweat and chills ran through her. Her nerves were so shot that she constantly walked sluggishly. She was twitchy and irritable. When the sister and brother got on the bus, the girl felt devastated. Kyle sat next to her and played on his phone. Amy had no idea what to do next. Unfortunately, Bridget was right about something. Amy had been raised by her father as a princess, not a fighter. The girl tried to cultivate her own fortitude and determination, but she simply did not have the strength and courage to fight her stepmother openly. It seemed to her that there were no people left in the world who could help her. Meanwhile, Bridget had connections, which she kept mentioning. She spoke of friendships with lawyers and police officers, of going shopping with the judge's wife, and of how any word from Amy could turn over like the rebellion of an unstable teenager. She had long been preparing to accuse the girl. "You know, I love Amy and Kyle very much. They are like family to me," Bridget convinced everyone. "But Amy does not perceive me as part of the family, and after the death of my father and the refusal from the college, she began to behave terribly. She constantly shouts, swears, and brings me to tears. I understand how great her grief is, but she does not even give me a chance to help her." People around always nodded understandingly, comforting Bridget, who was shedding false tears. They gave valuable advice on the upbringing of a difficult teenager, not suspecting how things really were. Therefore, Amy did not even try to reclaim her part of the house or her father's inheritance. She wasn't afraid of losing the property, she was afraid of losing her brother. Bridget would definitely be able to pull something like that off. Amy left a note for her stepmother, stating that they had gone to the capital to be with her friends, and warning her not to look for them. She believed that Bridget would be pleased to see them escape, and they would figure everything out. The Granny's house was located on the outskirts of the town. The yard was overgrown with tall weeds. Under the sprawling apple tree there was a bench with peeling white paint. The old house, with its wooden facade, looked at its guests through sad windows. Its walls seemed to have no memory of life inside. The whole appearance of the building made the girl sad, but she did not show her sadness. "There's our new home," the girl exclaimed cheerfully. "Later, I'll enroll you in the local school and try to get custody. I'll be 18 soon, and when I get a job, I'll start collecting documents." The brother and sister started settling into their new place and got used to the house. Usually Kyle hated change. He would insist on the immutability of the world around him, and did not accept changes well, wanting to go back to the familiar. So now he had a hard time accepting what was happening, but even he was able to come to terms with the new reality. Kyle loved the attic floor. It smelled of wood and dust, was filled with old things. He loved the way the light shone through the only window. Eventually, he moved his paints and brushes there so he could create in silence. Unfortunately, they could not take the heavy easel or canvases with him. But Amy promised him that she would get him new ones. The boy, sensitive to their difficulties, never once complained of hardship. Amy threw away her SIM card, although at first she was worried that they would come for them and was afraid of the sight of police cars. After a month, she completely relaxed. She got a job in a cafe that had recently opened in the town. When Kyle went to the local school, the girl was anxious. How would he be received in the new place? Wouldn't the children be angry if they learned about his illness? Although the older Kyle became, the fewer health problems he had. The boy was still characterized by reticence, closeness, and unusual behavior in critical situations, especially since the boy had always attended correctional school. However, everything got better. One day, Kyle came home from school and put his briefcase in a strictly designated place, but his whole demeanor was mysteriously solemn. "Something happened?" the sister asked, looking at her brother with interest. It had been a long time since she had seen him so emotional. "Amy, I've found a friend," replied the boy happily. "His name is Tom, and he asked to sit with me at the same desk." Later, the boy confessed, "You know, I like it here better than in the old school." The teachers also liked Kyle, especially a history teacher who had been raising a child with special needs. After another school day, Kyle went out, where he was met by Amy, and he proudly told her, "Today we had an art lesson, and I taught everyone to draw flowers, even our teacher." Amy laughed the whole way, listening to how Kyle, in his manner, managed to teach an experienced teacher how to superimpose shadows in drawings. Her chest overflowed with joy for her brother, who was blossoming in his new environment. Amy thought that maybe this was what he had needed all his life. On his birthday, Kyle received a cherished easel and a set of canvases to go with it. He immediately climbed into the attic, which turned into his creative studio, even ignoring the birthday cake. From then on, he would run straight upstairs after school to paint. After 2 weeks of painstaking work, Kyle presented a portrait of their father to Amy. "I decided to paint Daddy," said the boy calmly, without even twitching an eyebrow. "I miss him." Amy pulled the boy to her, ruffling his hair and kissing the top of his head. She was amazed. It had been 2 years, but the resemblance of the portrait to their father was fantastic. Every feature was drawn, even the light, inconspicuous mole above his eyebrow. "It's wonderful, Kyle," whispered the girl, and her voice trembled treacherously. "I think it's the most beautiful work you've done." Tears sprang to her eyes, and she tried to blink more often to get rid of them. Kyle peered into her face with careful attention. He didn't want to upset his sister. Meanwhile, Amy smiled radiantly. "You're incredibly talented. I think you're a genius, really," she praised the young artist. "I hope you become a well-known artist." Amy believed in her words and encouraged her brother in his art as much as she could. They lived in the new place for more than a year. There were wonderful people in the old place. Old and young, they welcomed the strange girl and her brother. The neighbours often came bearing gifts and helped them with household chores, and the town itself was no longer as squalid as Amy remembered. Supermarkets had opened, a couple of cafes and restaurants had been established, a beautiful park had been created, and there were a couple of beauty salons. Thus passed a couple more years. Amy gave up enrolling in college. The girl worked in a cafe and sometimes picked up a cleaning job a few days a week. Every time she promised herself that she would start preparing for the exams and fulfill her dream, she kept putting it off in a distant box. She just couldn't imagine how she would be able to study in the city. Who would she leave her brother with? What if something happens and she is far away? Anxious thoughts did not let the girl go, making her sink increasingly into routine and forget about journalism. Once, Amy came to the cafe for a paycheck with Kyle. He was sitting at a far table and waiting for his sister to finish her business, so they could go for a walk. Kyle, out of habit, looked at the far wall of the hall, painted sky blue. There was nothing on it but a large TV set that showed music videos and sometimes soccer matches. That day, the director's son, Evan, was here. He was already familiar with both Amy and her brother. Moreover, the man sincerely cared about the hard-working worker who was forced to raise her brother alone. The young man liked the beautiful girl, but she answered all his advances with a meek smile. Amy had no time at all for a personal life, and she simply did not see Evan's gestures as flirtation. She naively assumed that the man was kind to everyone. Now, seeing Kyle, Evan wondered why the young visitor was looking at the wall so attentively, even frowning with judgment. He hadn't dared to ask a question before, realizing that the child wasn't ordinary, but now curiosity was stronger. "Hello, Kyle," the man said, offering a businesslike greeting and shaking the small hand. "Hello," the boy replied with a nod. "Say, why are you always looking at the wall?" asked Evan. "There's nothing interesting here." "That's right, you lack colours and drawings," calmly replied the boy. "I would like to paint this wall. I don't like it." The man scratched his stubby chin. "What if I let you?" "Will you pay me?" For the first time in the whole dialogue, the boy turned to him, giving the man a most serious look. "Of course," the man said, trying to hide a smile. "Any labour must be paid, right?" The boy held out his palm for another handshake. "Then I'm ready," he said seriously. Evan kept his word. He bought the necessary paints and let the child into his cafe. The cafe was designed by designers. Evan's father was indignant. "But you trusted a child to paint the walls." But Evan only waved his hand at his father's lamentations. "You yourself entrusted me with this business, and it is going well," noted the man. "In case of an emergency, I can always cover the wall with paint if it's awful. And so, by the way, only locals come to our place, and they come for delicious coffee and polite service, not to look at the walls." However, the man's words became a kind of prophecy, but in reverse. As soon as Kyle finished painting the wall and received his fee, which Evan did not skimp on, people from all corners of the town reached them. They took pictures of the wall and posted them on social networks, adding that it was all the work of the schoolboy's hands. Even people from the city began to come to look at the interior of the cafe, which was renewed by the child. And there was a lot to see. Kyle was able to create a fantastic painting. The walls were decorated with half-destroyed bricks, which were painted as if they were three-dimensional. People even came up and furtively touched the painted masonry, not believing their eyes. And there, behind the ruined brick wall, a marvellous city could be seen, and everything in it was drawn to the smallest detail. You could look into the windows of the houses and see the people living in them. A family sitting at the dinner table, the man working at the table, a woman watering flowers. There were mysterious gardens growing in the city, whose trees were full of flowers, and birds perched on the branches. In the distance you could see a strip of river that shone silver. The city was warmed by the setting sun. There were so many small details in the work that one could sit in front of the wall for hours and find something new. That's how many people learned about Kyle's talent. And the boy, having received the first real money for his labour, gave it to his older sister and said, "I want to go to the city on weekends, to the city park." "But why?" asked Amy. "I'm going to work," explained Kyle, in a tone that brooked no objections. "When you and I walked there last time, I saw artists. Some were painting portraits, others were selling paintings. I could try to sell mine too." "Don't you feel sorry to part with them?" asked Amy. "No," replied the boy calmly. I feel sorry for you. I don't want you to clean the houses and dirty your hands." Amy dimmed her eyes and automatically hid her hands in her pockets. Her hands were really red, and her nails had to be cut because they were constantly breaking and cracking due to the detergents. Even gloves did not save the girl. At first, Amy carefully tried to dissuade her brother from his scheme, but she faced the usual manifestation of Kyle's character. He was persistent in his desire to sell paintings, and no one and nothing could stop him. Amy resigned herself to her brother's decision, and on the next weekend, with good weather, they went to the city, accompanied by Evan. The man, having learned about their plans, said he simply would not allow them to carry heavy canvases on their own. When Evan went out to refuel the car, Kyle calmly said, "He likes you." Amy blushed to the roots of her hair and turned sharply to her brother, who was sitting in the back seat with his cheek propped up and staring blankly out the window. "He's just being kind," she explained. "He probably feels sorry for us." The boy looked at his sister and objected. "No, he always looks at you. He smiles when you smile and laughs at your jokes. Although they're not funny at all, Amy, they're stupid." The girl pouted unhappily, muttering, "No, they are not stupid." But her brother's words fell heavily on her heart. She also liked Evan, but could not dare to think about a relationship with him. The other Amy, daughter of a famous and wealthy journalist, could imagine dating Evan. However, the new, dim version of herself, with an unsightly future, chipped fingernails and a younger brother to take care of, could not think about love. These gloomy thoughts spoiled the girl's much-enjoyed mood, and she even got angry with her brother, something she rarely allowed herself to do. Why had he said that? Why did he have to remind her again that she was only a shadow of herself? However, Evan managed to dispel her bad mood when he parked at the park and said that he wanted to spend the day with them. "If I, of course, do not bother you," he noted, looking at Amy, whose cheeks immediately blushed. "You will not bother us," Kyle replied businesslike. "And by the way, we still have to drive back." Amy snorted with laughter, amazed at her brother's simplicity. He always expressed his thoughts with sincere directness, but usually his reflections were not childish at all. They spent the afternoon beautifully. They ate hot dogs and ice cream, drank milkshakes, and watched the local skaters perform stunts. They listened to the music of street bards. Unfortunately, Kyle did not sell a single painting, but all passers-by looked at his creations with interest. "Did he paint it himself?" An elderly man with big glasses marvelled. Kyle nodded affirmatively. "The boy has talent," another woman marvelled. As evening came, the boy said, "We'll go again next week. You can date with Evan and I'll draw." Evan and Amy, who were sitting in the front, hesitantly looked at each other. Amy felt awkward, wondering whether she should justify her brother's words, but she had no time to open her mouth, as Evan, smoothly slowing down at a red light, looked at her with a smile. "Well, Amy, will you go on a date with me next Saturday?" Amy blinked, amazed, feeling her heart beat faster. "I will." The girl smiled, embarrassed. Kyle, sitting in the back, paid absolutely no attention to them. So, Amy and Evan began to date. The young man came to visit them and invited the brother and sister to his place. They played board and computer games, watched TV, ate snacks, and in general had a great time. Amy, looking at how well Evan got along with her brother, marvelled. Every Saturday, they carefully put Kyle's paintings in the trunk of Evan's car and went to the city. For them, it had already become a kind of ritual. Kyle's persistence and efforts soon paid off. One day, Kyle sold one of his paintings to a man who promised to hang it in his cafe. Later, Amy learned that this man was an acquaintance of Evan's, but she was not angry about the deception. After all, Kyle was happy and proud. Part of the proceeds he spent on dinner for 3, wanting to celebrate an important event. And, although Evan offered to pay for everything, the young artist was categorically opposed. Then the boy sold another 3 paintings to random passers-by, and one day fate intervened. It was a gloomy day, and the sun, which had recently lit up the city, shamefully and somehow sharply hid behind clouds and grey clouds. Although it was still warm outside, people were hiding in cafes and shopping centres, fearing the impending rain and bad weather. The park was deserted, with only the occasional passer-by glancing at the paintings displayed in a row. "We should probably leave," Amy said apprehensively, looking at the darkening sky. "What if it starts to rain and wet the paintings?" "Half an hour more," Kyle asked, frowning at his forehead. "I think I will sell something today." The girl didn't argue with her brother, just looked at the time and measured the hour. When the time was almost up, an elderly but sturdy man with a greying beard and stylish clothes stopped beside them. His eyes were wide open, and his gaze was fixed on one of the paintings. Amy glanced at Evan, who also frowned at the strange character. The stranger's reaction was unusual, as if he had seen a ghost. Then the man looked at the boy, who calmly looked at the stranger. "I can't believe," he whispered, looking at the boy. Then he raised his hand and pointed to the portrait of their father. "This is Harry Cohen," he affirmatively stated. Amy tensed her whole body. She didn't understand who this man was and how he knew their father. Waiting for the child's nod, the man splashed his hands. "I can't believe it," he repeated. "You're his son, and you're his daughter, right? Amy, of course it's you. You're 2 copies of Harry and Sarah, and all this time you've been under our noses." "Excuse me, who are you?" Amy got up from her seat on the bench, approaching her brother and the strange man. Behind her shadowed Evan, ready to intervene in the situation. The stranger laughed merrily and clapped his hands. "Who am I?" he exclaimed. "I seem to be the one sent to you by fate, a guardian angel." Then he laughed, shaking his head and still looking at the children with disbelief and joy. "Some kind of crazy," the girl thought fearfully, raking her brother by the shoulders and pulling him to her. "Listen, we're not—" Amy began cautiously. But the stranger didn't let her finish. He approached the trio with a happy, immensely kind smile on his lips, and said what the girl never wanted to hear again. "Your father is looking for you. It's time to go home." It was hard to believe the man's story, but they really wanted to. The mysterious stranger turned out to be Mr. Lewis, the same man who had brought their father to his magazine. Mr. Lewis spent the money he earned on travelling, living at his own pleasure. When he learned that Harry was missing, he decided to arrive on the scene himself. Mr. Lewis organised a search party together with close friends, and a miracle happened. Harry was found in one of the villages. It turned out that the man hit a rock in the river. Fortunately, the current did not allow him to go to the bottom, throwing him on the bank of one of the settlements. They took him out and put him back on his feet, but he had lost his memory. Of course, the man was taken home. Fortunately, memories returned to Harry when he arrived home. But he was shocked when he did not find his children at home. Instead of Amy and Kyle, he was met by an astonished Bridget and her new boyfriend. The lover immediately retreated, having correctly interpreted the gaze of the owner of the house. "Please understand me, Harry, I thought you were dead," a scared Bridget screamed. "I would never do this, but I was in so much pain that I—" "Where are my children?" Harry interrupted her. The woman turned pale as a canvas. Her eyes ran as if trying to find an answer. "When you were gone, when you disappeared," Bridget began to babble. "Amy went completely crazy. She started threatening me and swearing all the time. She got impulsive. You know, once she jumped on me and grabbed me by the hair. Honestly." "Where are they?" the man repeated, his voice filled with worry. "I don't know. They left," the woman mumbled. "Amy wouldn't have left. She wanted to go to college, and she wouldn't have put her brother in danger, Bridget." About studying. The woman averted her eyes, hiding the lie. She didn't enroll. She was too upset. I tried to talk her out of it, but it was no use. Where did they go? He asked, angry that he had to pull the words out of the woman. Bridget shrugged. She left a note and said they'd be in the capital. Bridget, did you leave my daughter and underage son alone while you lived in my house, spending their inheritance on your pathetic bling and lovers? Harry yelled, venting his anger. Why didn't you call the police? In a fit of anger, he kicked the low table on which the traces of a romantic dinner had been left. A bottle of dry red wine, fruit, cheese slices. A red stain began to spread across the expensive carpet. Bridget screamed and cried, begging for forgiveness, while lying at the man's feet. Get out, he clucked decisively. I don't believe a word you say. My daughter, you have no idea what kind of daughter I have. Harry felt hurt and scared. Where were his children? He immediately rushed to the police station and then took tickets to the capital. He couldn't imagine how he would search 2 children in a metropolis. After all, it was like finding a needle in a haystack. But he was unable to sit still. Amy's friends answered that she hadn't communicated with anyone for a long time, and at the college she was supposed to enter, they said that she never showed up, although she got a budget place. Much later, Harry learned that it was Bridget, wanting to ruin the future of her stepdaughter, who substituted the letter from the university. She sent Amy to work and left her at home as a personal maid, not letting her get her cherished education. The terrible days began. It is rightly said that to hide something, you need to put it in a prominent place. Harry and Mr. Lewis looked for the children in the capital and cities, and no one even thought of just going to the house of their grandmother. And so one cloudy day, Harry received a call from a friend. Harry, I found them! I found your children! The man thought for a moment that he had gone deaf. He swayed, grabbing the wall. A wave of relief came over him. His heart raced in his father's chest. They'd found them. I'll hand them the phone now, Mr. Lewis said. An extraneous noise was heard in the telephone receiver, and then a thin female voice, shuddering, hesitantly said, Daddy, is it you? The man's throat was squeezed with a powerful vise, and tears appeared in his eyes. Amy, he whispered, swallowing a huge lump. Amy, my daughter. Yes, it's me. I love you, my daughter. Are you okay? Where are you? How is Kyle? Is he all right? My darlings, where have you been? He just pelted his daughter with questions, unable to contain himself. But Amy did not find the strength to answer. Daddy, the girl exclaimed louder, and then sobbed to tears. Daddy, I missed you so much. I thought you... Daddy... Unable to contain her emotions, she gave the phone to her younger brother, and her sobs were replaced by a focused tone. Daddy, when are you coming for us? Asked Kyle calmly, adding, It's time to go home. The man smiled through his tears, imagining his son's face. Soon, Sonny, promised to the father. I'll be there soon, and we'll be fine. Harry raised his eyes to the sky, where, as he thought, his gone wife Sarah sometimes looked at him. Hot, salty tears poured from his eyes. But for the first time in a long time, his soul was at peace.